So let's get started then. So hi everyone, thanks a lot for being here, for joining today's webinar. Of course, it's our third year in a row doing this server webinar series, and I'm very excited to be here actually. But let me first introduce myself, of course. So my name is Fernando Vizcaíno. I'm an Alteryx specialist from Brazil, talking from Brazil, right? I'm working with Alteryx for the past 8 years with BI, analytics, database tools, but mostly Alteryx for the past 8 years. I've been on Alteryx Ace for the past 2. And I've been working during these years, so everything related to Designer, Server, projects, working sessions, training, so you name it. So everything that can be done with Alteryx, I've been there already. And of course, I'm also an Alteryx community top contributor. I'm there all the time, answering all the questions. Maybe you saw me there. And if I was not able to help you, I'm sorry. I'm doing my best, but that's basically it. And of course, as a reminder, if you would like to learn more about Alteryx and how to empower your organization, please follow Data Meaning on LinkedIn as well in our YouTube channels. We are posting content on a weekly basis. And if I'm not mistaken, it's 3 videos per week. So a lot of content there and very interesting stuff. Okay, and about Data Meaning, right? So we are a boutique BI consultants founded in 2005 and work with end-to-end BI solutions. So everything from the use case, right, we will be able to support you during the whole process, understanding and talking about your issues, your challenges, and also providing and suggesting the right tool. So as you can see, we have many software partners here. It's not everything that we have, it's only a summary of everything that we are able to work with, as well as everything related to project delivery and also training if you are interested, right? But of course, the first question here, since it's a 12-week webinar series, is if Alteryx Server series webinars series is for you, right? Let's just close my video here and let's just get started. So the first question there is that, so is the series for you, right? So the first answer there that you should be looking for is that, of course, if your company have multiple data analyst teams and users of information, and of course, we all been there, right? So all the companies have been working with data for a long time now, and maybe the issue there is that we don't really know how to use data correctly, right? Of course, the second reason there would be, yeah, you purchase 5 or more designer license. Of course, this is not carved in stone, so it doesn't have to be 5, can be more or less, or you have been through 2 or 3 expanded cycles, meaning, and that's usually what happens. So you start by using or purchasing 1 designer, and then as you move forward, you feel the need of purchasing more designers, and then maybe now it's the time for you to work or to find more about server. The third reason here is that you are looking to provide access to your processes and workflows to all of your business teams. So you have a team of developer, for example, and you want to leverage that team to start sharing processes with all the other areas. Or you are from IT and you have difficulty understanding what everyone is doing. So this could be increasing your risk exposure, or at least you are not aware of everything that everyone is doing, the data set that it's been using for everyone, so that could be an issue. But of course, last but not least, you may be an Alteryx Server administrator or a user, a developer looking to learn more about server in general, right? So if you are in any of these topics, Alteryx Server series is for you, right? But of course, we have a long journey ahead of us, and always start with this very first webinar. So today we'll be talking about Alteryx Server as a whole. So basic features and its basic use, right? So have a broad understanding of what will come ahead in the next sessions, right? In the next two sessions, the user side overview, as well as the upload and production process. We'll be talking about the user side, the user and the developer side. So you'll learn how to work in the gallery, how the gallery works, and the gallery is the front end of Alteryx Server, as well as how to move your processes from your computer to Alteryx Server. In other words, from your designer to your gallery, right? And of course, for the first time, the upload a workflow, we usually have a few issues there that we'll be able to solve if you attend this session. Right next, we'll be talking about the admin side as well as the best practice. So in these two sessions, you'll learn how to manage your server. So you as an admin, and in Alteryx words, a curator, you'll be able to see everything that can be done if you are an admin for the gallery, right? As well as understanding how to best leverage all the content that you have there available. So with this admin best practice session, you understand the components of the Alteryx Server backend and learn how each component interacts with each other. And of course, we'll also talk during this session about best practice when setting up your server environment for the first time, okay? Right next to it, do you need to call IT? So you could be a user, you could be a developer, and I do think that this is a very important session for admins and also end users for you to know everything or every issue that you might encounter when working in the gallery, right? So maybe you think that's a bug, so that's very common for someone to think that you found a bug, but actually a lack of permission, for example. So that will be a conversation between a user and an admin about all of these issues, all of these problems or questions that you might have as well. And after that, of course, we'll guide you through the installation of deployment of your first server. So learn how to install and what are the things that you need to worry before installing, right? So a proper plan for you to do your installation and everything go as seamlessly as possible. And of course, you'll be able to understand the architecture, right? So from this on out, since you have your server installed, now you need to understand what is the next level. So maybe you are in this part already. So right, you have an Alteryx server, you have a single node, like a base Alteryx server license, and you want to know more about what else you can do with your server. So what happens if you have more users running workflows in your gallery? What happens if you have more developers or anything like that? So here we'll show you all the options and everything related to architecture and scaling up. And of course, we have 4 additional advanced sessions here, and it goes through managing your MongoDB. So MongoDB is the backend database of Alteryx Server. So there you have all the content, all the information of everything you have available on your server. And by managing your MongoDB, you'll be able to understand some possible issues, as well as leverage that information for you to know better about the usage of your Alteryx server and users also, right? And by managing your MongoDB, you'll also be able to troubleshoot your server. Of course, these are basically a one session, right? So by managing your MongoDB, maybe you find some issues in your server, but in this session, the 10th session, you'll be able to also understand logs and some of the most usual issues that you may encounter in your server. It could be during an installation, it could be during a workflow execution, so you name it. So that's the session for you to understand more about the backend, about IT working to solve your problem, right? And also for developers or admins actually, so have the Gallery API overview, so understand how this actually works. As well, you build one during the webinar, right? So you learn how to build one, believe it or not, in Alteryx Designer, right? But let's get started then with our webinar. So in our session, our first session, we'll be talking about, once again, introduction to Alteryx Server, and this our agenda. So you understand the pain points of someone that, of course, doesn't have Alteryx Server, and you understand the benefits as well as the key features, both for a user as well as an admin, right? And for the admin, it could be a gallery admin, right? A content admin, as well as an IT admin managing Alteryx Server machine, right? Lastly, we'll have Alteryx Server webinar series map. For those of you that don't have time to watch all the webinars, I have a guide. So if you're a user, a developer, or an admin, what sessions you should attend, right? And of course, a Q&A, you have that enabled already. So in your Zoom chats, I think at the bottom, you have a Q&A chat there. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to ask there. And we'll try our best to answer everything during the webinar as well as after the webinar, right? All right, talking about the pain points, right? And the first one, of course, is limited value from analytics. So have many users working with data nowadays on a day-to-day basis, right? But too few people in your organization knows how to work with data, or even knowing how to work with data, or knowing how to work with Excel, R, or any other platform, the users are unable to use data to answer questions. So that's a big issue that we have currently, right? And with that, also we have a productivity loss on repetitive data prep. So, right, so now you have a user that knows how to use Excel or knows how to code, but that user usually wastes time manually repeating data tests. Of course, they know how to optimize that, but maybe if that user is well-known, knows a lot of his deal, then maybe other people start asking for him to do work, right? To work for them. And that's when you start not having time anymore to optimize or to create optimized solutions to work with data, right? The other problem, all related here, the proliferation of analytic assets. So if you have, once again, the same example, let's use the Excel example for all the pain points here. So you have an Excel that is used as a database, that is already a problem, but the employees start working with these data sets and these processes to answer questions, and oftentimes it's all duplicate. You have multiple data sources working as the source of truth, and you have uncontrolled copies since you are sending that by email or any other platform, right? And with that, of course, you start seeing inconsistent data sources, right? And the issue there, of course, that workers currently leverage the easiest available data source, right? The problem there, of course, maybe you don't have permissions to access your prod environment or your sandbox data source. Then you ask someone to download an Excel file, or export an Excel file. So you are always using the easiest one, not the best one. And that leads to inconsistent conclusions, of course, outdated data sources, and that's a huge problem. IT backlog for analytics. So we all know that we have scarce IT resources, and they are always focused on critical organizational problems, right? So meaning that your ad hoc request to get access to a data source will not be their first priority, right? And then once again, it's a domino effect. So start working with inconsistent data sources, proliferating analytic assets that doesn't really have this one source of truth, and all the other problem also arise, right? And lastly, visibility into non-IT data process. So the idea here is that you have all of these problems. You are working with spreadsheets, you are working with many coding platforms, and your manager or your company don't have visibility of everything that everyone is doing, right? So let's say you leave the company or you go on holidays. What happens with everything that you were working on? Of course, you would need to guide someone to do all of the work, but wouldn't that be better if you have a platform to do that for you? Everything documented and all the access is done already, right? So that's the idea for Alteryx Server, right? And the first solution there, of course, we will provide you ways for you to automate and schedule your process, meaning that it will be simple, easy, and a secure method to create, deploy, and manage all of your jobs. So you don't need to do that manually anymore. You will be able to schedule that and control everything that you have, all of your processes, right? You will be able to also start sharing and collaborating with others. So let's say you are a developer and you want others to help you creating a process, an automated process, right? So with Alteryx Server now, you'll be able to save all of the workflows in a centralized repository. And the best thing there that you have also version control, right? And also ways for collaborating in a securely method, right? And if you want, of course, to roll back or if you want to delete a version for any reason, you will be able to do that. And of course, you have logs related to everything that you are doing on server. Extensible analytics. So now with Alteryx Server, you'll be able to create, publish, and share everything with other users. And one thing that's very important here, of course, for those of you that are already working with Designer, you have a license for that. But for Alteryx Server now, you will be able to share all of your work, all of your processes with users that have no knowledge whatsoever about Alteryx, have no technical knowledge, and have no designer license. And those users now will be able to consume everything that you, a developer, is developing to your company, right? Data connection management. So now you have a centralized way of managing all the data connection as well as credentials, right? So you don't actually need to have a user, a password, or all the information to a data source, as long as you have X permission to use that data connection, you will be able to use Alteryx to connect to that data source, right? So it's a secure method with no password sharing, no user sharing. So that's a good thing. And I will show this later for you guys. Flexible deployment and high availability. So now with Alteryx Server, of course, we always start with a single node environment, but similar to Designer, you have building blocks, right? So like a Lego block, and you will be able to include more performance, more user interaction, user experience, a better user experience, or ways for you to better manage all the information you have inside your server. And you don't need to decide that right now. So you can later include those blocks for you to have a robust environment that is capable of managing everything and also providing a seamless use experience for everyone, right? And of course, For the admins, you have security and all the governance. So with server now, of course, you'll be able to manage everything that everyone is doing. So have visibility about what everyone's sharing with each other, as well as a detailed usage reporting, auditing, logging information, right? And of course, Alteryx Server can be connected to your Active Directory or using SAM, right? SAML, right? So that's both options when working with Alteryx Server. But starting right now with all the features, so it's very important for you to understand each of these. And of course, when we start talking by scheduling processes, one thing that I already mentioned, but it's great to mention that once again, is that everything will be developed in your Alteryx Designer, right? So you'll be able to get data from anywhere. You'll be able to prep your data, doing all types of analysis. You will be able to do reporting, geospatial, as well as predictive and prescriptive analytics. And related to the outputs, same idea. We'll be able to export that to files, data sources, data vistos, or any type of connector or API that you want to connect to, right? So this is done in your designer, but of course, now that you need to share this with other users, with no technical knowledge, right? Then that's when the server start to be the next level for you, right? So saying here, this is a simple demonstration, right? But here you'll be able to see the user side of the platform. You have here your workspace. So this your place of development. And here, since I'm a developer, you can see that here my name, I have all the workflows that I have developed before, right? And from here, of course, I will be able to share this with other users. But one thing that is very important right now is that I'm able to see all the workflow results from the past. So let's say for compliance or audit purposes, you need to get the information from last year, and you need to get the data from that workflow that was in a different version, right? So from here, you have access to all the logins as well as all the outputs generated for that workflow. And also from here, you'll be able to manage all of your schedules. So Alteryx does a great job by leveraging your developers as well as your end users. So from here, you'll be able to manage everything that you have. So it's not the responsibility of an IT or your server admin. It's your responsibility to manage all of your workflow results, all of your schedules, all of your collections as well. We'll talk about that later. But the whole idea is that you will be able to manage everything and also share this with other users when you want, right? And that's when sharing and collaboration comes, right? So here you can see a workflow. So I have a simple workflow here called data prep. From here, you have, you can see that this workflow, for example, is a public workflow, meaning that all the users are able to see and run this workflow. I'm able to download, schedule, and also run the workflow, right? But let's say that I'm currently developing a new version of this workflow. And as you can see here, we have all the versions available for this one. So I'm the 5th version. The one published for the end users are the 3rd one. So this is the one that end users are using to run their processes. But since I'm updating that same workflow, I'm able to also develop that from here. And also, if you want to manage, you can see here the version history. And here you can start by collaborating with other developers, right? So you can see here we have a different offer. You have the comments here. If you want to roll back to a previous version, you are able to. If you want to publish after the validation, you will also be able to do that. So it's very important. Instead of creating that numerous versions. So version 1, version 2, version 3, version 1_1 final. So all those things, now you'll be able to manage everything from this centralized space, right? And also when we talk about the user side, you as a developer, you have the option to share your workflows publicly and also privately. So when you talk about public workflow, so if the user has access to your Alteryx Gallery, your server, they will be able to see and run all of the workflows inside of these districts, right? So let's say I will click here on the pre-sales district, and you can see that you have 3 different workflows. How many times it was run, I'm the owner, the upload dates, and that's the whole idea. So all users are able to run these workflows. But of course, if you want to share those workflows privately with a project team or your area, for example, you can create a collection and start sharing all of the assets with a group of users, a group of private users. And from the collections here, you can see that you can share workflows as well as schedules with users, as well as user groups, right? So once again, that example, if you leave the company or if you're going on holidays, you can share your schedules and your workflows here with other developers or users for them to manage everything that you have. And of course, if you are an Alteryx Designer user, you know already, if you open that workflow on Designer, it's all documented, right? So that's a great thing about Alteryx. All right, so collections, all private. If you go to the pre-sales team, you'll see here similar workflows, but now these workflows are only shared with a group of selected users. And since I'm the collection owner, I'm the one deciding who can see these workflows. And of course, I can invite here other developers, and these other developers can also be a content admin or a user admin of this collection and this collection only, right? So as you can see, you have an admin role for the gallery in general, but you have an admin role for your workflows, an admin role for your collections and everything that you own on the gallery, right? And of course, when you go to a workflow, right, as an end user, you have many options. So here as an example, so if you run, an end user runs a workflow on the gallery, you can share with them, or you can have this as an option for the end user to download the outputs. Another option would be, for example, to send an email, or it could be for the user to see a PDF report here, right? So you have multiple options here when working with end users, but the whole idea here is that now an end user with no Alteryx knowledge, no technical knowledge, is also capable of getting their answers to a process or to a question that they have, right? And of course, for some of these processes, it needs to be interactive, right? And that's when analytic app comes in place. So with analytic app, that's something that you also build in your designer. But from here, and this is only an example, of course, but in this option, this process here, for some reason, the user had most recent database that they need to use in this process, right? So let's say that now, every time this user executes this workflow, they will have the option to upload a most recent sales volume file, as well as selecting the city. So let's say that this analytical app is for us to start doing some data prep in our sales volume database, and we have a group of users, a group of employees each responsible for one city, right? So from here, the user will be able to upload the sales volume file, as well as filtering the correct city and also selecting the correct columns, right? And after running, they would be able to interact with the workflow the same way as a developer would be interacting with Alteryx Designer. So the idea here is that if you are able to interact with your workflow on Designer, you will be able to also create a user interface for the end user to select. So as you can see, the most dynamic way you can think of, you can have this analytic app for an end user. But of course, when we are talking about extensible analytics, you couldn't forget to mention Gallery APIs, right? So when we think about Gallery APIs, one of the greatest application, of course, would be for us to use other platforms to integrate with Alteryx Server with no human interaction. So now, instead of running your workflows from the gallery or scheduling your workflows, you can have another platform calling your workflows from a distance, right? And that's very important. Another option would be for workflow orchestration or processes orchestration, as well as job scheduling with third-party tools. Dependency-based scheduling in the gallery. So if you have workflows that are dependent to another one, so that's something that you would be able to also do with APIs. Web page or BI dashboard using Alteryx engine as the backend. So the idea here would be, so let's say that you have a form that a customer needs to fill out in your ad page, and you are performing credit scoring, for example. So your form, your web page form would be integrated with the Alteryx Gallery. And by using the APIs, we would send that file to an Alteryx engine. I would run a process and return if that customer is approved or not, right? And of course, everything related to Alteryx Server governance. So with APIs, you will be able to migrate workflows between environments. So meaning if you have a sandbox as well as a production environment, instead of doing that manually, with the APIs, you would be able to migrate that automatically, right? And right now, with the new version, the V3 version of the endpoints, you are able to migrate also the content from one server to another. And by content, I mean the structure, right? So of course, if you want to mimic the sandbox or to mimic your production server to be your sandbox with all the content, all the workflows, we have a different process for that. But if you want to only mimic the structure, the configuration, the collections, then you would be able to do that with this brand new endpoints, right? And lastly, of course, if you have a centralized version control repository already in place, you would be able to use Gallery API. So you would publish from your repository to the gallery automatically without any human interaction or manual work, right? Okay. Moving forward here with data connection management. So now with your data connections as well as credentials, so you'll be able to have central management of every connection and every credential that you have available for your both end users and developers. So for example, here, right now, I have this Microsoft SQL connection, and I have a specific user here, a specific password, but this has been shared with 8 different developers. So now these users are able to use the Alteryx Designer or run workflows on the gallery with this connection. So And from here, you'll be able to control everything that everyone has access to. So if you have a connection and the user is not here, the workflow won't run. So the user can have access to the workflow with that data connection. But if the user is not here, if you as an admin didn't share that connection with that user, so the workflow will basically not work, right? So it's a centralized space for you to see everything that everyone is connecting to. And the same goes for credentials, right? So of course, if you have permissions to impersonate another user, right? So for example, for connecting to a data source, or for you to be able to connect to a share folder or to save a file to a share folder, all of those things, maybe if you don't have permissions to access that share folder, with these credentials, you'll be able to impersonate that user. And it's the same idea. So for example, I have my credential here, right? And I'm sharing this credential with myself for me to be able to use this on Designer without always needing to include the password and my username. But also Gabriel here is also using my credential. So if I have a share folder that he doesn't have access, he'll be able to access that by using my credential. But of course, this all managed by your admin, by your IT. And if you don't have permissions to impersonate other users in your company, so we can also disable this option, right? And also here, of course, when we are talking about the flexible deployments, we always start with a single node environment. So as you can see here, all the components I stated here. So the worker is the one responsible for running all of your workflows. So you can think of this to simplify as your Alteryx Designer, right? Your database here is your MongoDB, is the backend that manages all the contents, all the information that you have inside your server. The gallery, the one providing the user interface for the end user, and the scheduler, of course, responsible for managing all the jobs that you have, the users and the developers have scheduled on the server, right? So, of course, for starters, you will be using this single node, but as the usage increase, maybe you have more end users running workflows simultaneously, or you have more developers including processes, publishing processes in your server, and that's when you need to think about scaling, right? So have two options there to scale up your server, so you can add more cores, more RAM, right? As well as scaling out. So this first example here, and as I mentioned, it's Lego blocks. You only need to install an additional worker and it will all work as usual. So from here, right now, we'll be able to run more workflows simultaneously, or we'll be able to have more end users manually running workflows at the same time as well. But of course, after having that, so we have 4 different workers, you're done with it. And now you need to start thinking about high availability or redundancy, right? And of course, that's when we need to start thinking about replica sets. So the idea here is that you are including these replica sets to build redundancy, right? So you have your primary nodes right here, and these are your secondaries. So if for some reason this database gets corrupted or the server is not working anymore, then the secondary start acting as the primary one and no one will notice. So have the same information as you had it with your primary, right? And after your primary back up once again, then you'll start acting like a secondary, and that's the whole idea, right? So if you want redundancy, if you want to be safe, if you're with all of your information in your server, that's when you need to start thinking about replica sets. But of course, with more work, more workflows, more users running workflows, everyone in your company starting to use Alteryx in general, then maybe you need to start also thinking about the user experience, right? So you have a number of users using analytical webs or running workflows manually. So now the idea is that by including another gallery and a load balancer controlling everything, you'll be able to provide a more seamless user experience, right? And that's the whole idea for the building block. So of course, you can also add more designers here. You can have a high availability controller as well, just in case, but everything that you are doing here, you can start from a single node and derive from that, right? And that's the whole idea. But of course, for you to understand and to notice that you need to do these upgrades, then you need to start scaling. You also need to understand how to manage and how to control all of the information, right? So, and that's the admin side of the gallery. So you have for admins, for IT admins, as well as gallery admins, you have this page here. And as you can see here, you'll be able to manage your subscriptions or studios or workspaces, right? You'll be able to manage your users, your workflows, and everything related. As you can see here, the data connections. So everything that needs to be managed, you have access from here. And one thing that's very important as well is this diagnostic page. It shows a summary of everything that you have in your server, right? Starting with apps, users, and collections, as well as a summary of everything that you have available in your server. So the number of studios, credentials, schedules, as well as data connections. And of course, related to your performance. So in this case, we have a single node here, only one worker. Related to the CPU, we are okay. But as you can see, related to the memory, maybe we have something there. Maybe when I took this print screen, we had a workflow running. But I don't think it's great for us to have the memory always in 60%. So right, so maybe this is the first, my first idea here would be for me to include more RAM to this server or to analyze what is actually happening, right? And for that, of course, you need to have information. So one great place for you to start to check if you need to scale out or to scale up is for you to look here in the schedule forecast. And if I to see the schedule forecast is right here, right? And with this option, you'll be able to see everything that is scheduled in your gallery, right? So as you can see, all color coded here. So darker blue means that we have more workflows than total capacity, right? And for this one, for example, the option here would be for me to move this workflow to a different slot, or when that's not possible anymore, that's when I need to think about scaling, right? So this is the first option, the first step for you to identify if you need scaling, but also we have something that we call Alteryx Server report, the usage report, where you will be able to see everything from access, right? So here you can see all the users, the busy times, right? So as you can see here, maybe you have a problem here at 8 p.m. for some reason. So people in data maintenance to work really late at night. So the whole idea is that maybe during this time, the users may be experience delays on the user's interface or things like that. And that's when maybe we need to decide about scaling out our gallery, right? Another thing that we can look here for the contents. So everything that is available in the gallery, right? So for example, this we have all the workflows and how many times each of these workflows was run before. So since this one, these two are our top performers. So maybe what we we could do here is to optimize these workflows before thinking about scaling. So as you can see with this dashboard, we'll be able to see everything that is happening inside your gallery, as well as all the permissions that your workflow has. So for example, I have one workflow here, and all of these workflows actually are not using credentials. So if you want to know the workflows that users are using to impersonate other users, so this is a great start, right? And of course, job analysis. So if you want to decide if you need more workers, so here's a good place. So for example, for this workflow, analyze and predict candidate something. So here you'll be able to see the runtime, right? So 20 or so seconds, how many times was run? I think maybe 10, 8 times this workflow was run. And you have also here the queue time. So the queue time is the waiting time for this workflow to be run. So by default, a worker node with 4 cores can run 2 workflows simultaneously, right? So if you need more workflows to run at the same time, you have multiple options. The first option, of course, for you to increase the number of workers. The other ones for you to increase the number of cores. But of course, you can also include a process for the users to not schedule during that time period, right? And that's the whole idea here. So for you to decide if you need to scale out or for you just to have more information about the usage, you have this Alteryx user report. That's great resource for you to know everything that is happening. And one thing worth mentioning here is that everything that you are seeing here is coming from MongoDB, right? So that session about MongoDB will help you understand how to build one dashboard like this one from scratch, okay? All right, so summarizing here, of course, with Alteryx Server, you'll be able to run more workflows simultaneously, right? So automate and schedule your processes. You'll be able to share both your development as well as your finished process with end users. So be able to collaborate in the development as well as share the results with end users with no Alteryx knowledge, right? So be able to schedule your processes and everything related to management and governing your server, you have that option here as well. But I want to wrap up here. One thing that I mentioned to you, I have this webinar series map. And since we have 4 different columns, 4 different rows, important rows, so these are the sessions that you must attend. So for end users, and an end user will be basically running workflows, not creating, right? So you need to understand how to use the gallery, as well as maybe a few questions that you need to know if you have access or permissions, try to better understand what you can ask your admin for, right? For developers, you can understand the APIs as well as everything related here to publishing your workflows, and the same goes for a gallery admin and server admin. Of course, I invite you to watch all the webinars, but feel free to select the ones that you are most interested with, right? Lastly here, of course, for everything that we are showing, that we will be showing in the next 2 months, we have a service for that. So from deciding if you really need a server until the point where you install or migrate and upgrade your server, we are here to support you. And also, if you have a server already and you are experiencing issues there, it could be problems with your workflow or performance issues, then we have something that we call server health check that will be able to identify all of those issues, right? So from workflow issues until server issues and performance issues, we'll be able to include everything in a report and suggest you the best way to tackle all of these problems, right? Also, for everything that I said here, we have enablement and training. So we have training sessions related to server, designer. We have ways of working with server inside your project, as well as handling everything that you have related to your server. So we'll be able to do managed service for all of your server tasks from now on, right? I think right now, maybe let me check if I have any questions on the chat. So the first one here, it's from Tonish. Hey, Tonish. So do you have to provide access to service accounts mapped to gallery for a share folder, or could we just add designer user credentials in gallery and folder can be accessed? So let me read that once again. So do we have to provide access to service accounts mapped to gallery, or could we just add designer user credentials? Yeah, so Tony, so great question. So yeah, so the first option, the best practice when working with service accounts is for the service accounts to have all the accesses needed. So meaning access to all the shared folders as well as the data sources. But if you want to do that on a workflow base, right? So you can select the option there for the developer to include the proper credentials before publishing the workflow. So have both options, right? The other option, the other question here is from Michael. So is there any option to have it in a virtual machine environment where it can be hosted on cloud directly by Alteryx? The first part of the question, so virtual machine environments, yes, you can leverage AWS or Azure, and I think we have images there in both. But related to host it and managed, so that's something that data mining can do for you. So if you don't want to host your server or to manage, that's something that we as a partner can do that for you. I think all the other questions were answered by Caesar, but other than that, it was a pleasure being here. Thanks a lot for attending today's webinar. And I really hope you found it insightful and exciting as I thought, right? As I'm feeling. So as a reminder, we'll be sending everything here, so the webinar recording via email to everyone who registered, but we'll also be uploading this video to our YouTube channel, right? So if you enjoy our webinar, once again, follow Data Mining on LinkedIn and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Once again, weekly videos there, Alteryx related or any other platform related. And of course, let us know if you have any questions or suggestions for future videos. Please contact us directly here if you want to book a discovery call for us to talk about Alteryx in general, or Alteryx Server, or anything at all. And that's basically it. Thanks again for watching and have a great Wednesday.